In the arid countryside of Rio Grande do Sul, João Henrique Machado, a solitary 45-year-old rancher, lives in isolation on his ranch after losing his wife and son in an accident. His life changes when he finds Sofia, a 19-year-old girl being used as payment for her brother's gambling debts. Determined to protect her, João offers her a home and a chance to start over, discovering that sometimes saving someone else is the first step to saving yourself. The sun rose lazily over the dry pastures of Rancho Santa Isabel, painting the sky in shades of orange that blended with the dust lifted by the dry morning wind of the southern Brazilian countryside. João Henrique Machado walked among the empty corrals, his worn leather boots marking the rhythm of a routine that had become his only companion over the past 3 years. At 45, the man once known for his hospitality and easy smile now carried the weight of a solitude that seemed greater than the land he had inherited from his father. The ranch, which once held over 200 head of cattle and a lively family, now echoed only with João's solitary footsteps and the occasional mooing of the few remaining cows. The big house, with its stone walls and wide porches, seemed far too empty for just one man. It was as if every room held ghosts of a past he fought to forget, yet they insisted on haunting him with every sunrise. That Saturday morning, João decided to head into town to buy supplies and maybe have a beer at São Manuel's bar, the only place where he could still tolerate being around other people for a few hours. His old red Ford pickup, over 15 years old, hummed along the dirt road that led to the center of Santa Rosa da Serra, a small town that seemed frozen in time, where everyone knew everyone's stories. São Manuel's bar sat on the main street, between Dona Cleusa's pharmacy and Antonio's hardware store. It was one of those typical countryside bars, with scratched wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and a counter that served everything from homemade cachaça to glass-bottled sodas. The smell of fried sausage and cheap cigarettes created an atmosphere that, while simple, offered temporary relief from the loneliness that consumed João. He was finishing his second beer when he heard raised voices coming from the back of the establishment. At first, he tried to ignore it. He wasn't one to meddle in other people's business, but something in the desperate tone of a young woman's voice made him pay attention. Amid the jumbled words and curses, he caught fragments of a conversation that chilled his blood. "Please, Marcelo, don't do this to me." Her voice trembled with fear and pleading. "It's already decided, Sofia. You're going to pay my debt, even if it's the way they want. I can't keep running from them." João knew that cruel dynamic. He had grown up in a region where some men still viewed women as property, where gambling debts could be settled in the most inhumane ways. His conscience wouldn't let him sit there pretending he hadn't just heard a young woman being sold by her own brother. He stood up from the table with determination, his muscles tense with the anger boiling in his veins. He walked toward the back of the bar, where a curtain of beads separated the main room from a reserved area usually used for card games. As he pulled it aside, he was met with a scene that brought back painful memories of his own youth, moments when he'd seen similar situations and forever regretted not acting. A man of about 30, thin, and looking like he hadn't slept in days, was tightly gripping the arm of a young woman who couldn't have been more than 19. She had long brown hair, green eyes brimming with contained tears, and a natural beauty that cruelly contrasted with the terror on her face. She wore simple clothes, a white blouse and a faded denim skirt, yet she still carried a dignity the situation hadn't completely erased. Next to them, two intimidating-looking men watched the negotiation as if they were buying livestock. One of them, overweight and with a scar cutting across his left cheek, gave a repulsive smile when he saw João approaching. "Well, Mr. João, what a surprise seeing you here. Didn't know you were into this kind of fun." João felt his fist clench involuntarily. He knew those men by reputation. They were enforcers from one of the region's illegal gambling houses, known for the violence with which they dealt with unpaid debts. "I'm not, and you know that," he said with a steady but firm voice. "What's going on here?" Marcelo, visibly nervous at João's presence, tried to explain. "Mr. João, this is none of your business. It's a family matter, you understand?" "Family?" João looked directly at Sofia, who stared back at him with a mix of hope and despair. "There's nothing family about what you're doing here." The scarred man laughed loudly, an unpleasant sound that echoed through the stuffy room. "Look at this, folks. The lonely widower wants to play hero. How sweet." The mockery hit João like a punch in the gut, but he didn't flinch. He had already lost everything that mattered in life. He had nothing left to lose, except his humanity, and that he wasn't willing to give up. "How much does he owe?" he asked directly. surprising everyone in the room. 15,000, the fat man replied, now intrigued by where the conversation was heading. And if I pay it, does the girl go free? Sophia looked at him with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was hearing. Marcelo looked confused, as if unable to process the proposal. Mr. João, you don't even know her, he muttered. I don't need to know her to know this is wrong. João pulled his phone from his pocket. I'm calling my bank manager. You'll have the money within an hour. The silence that followed was heavy as molten lead. Sophia began to cry quietly, not from despair but from relief. Marcelo stared at the floor, finally weighed down by shame. The two enforcers exchanged glances, clearly calculating whether it was worth accepting the deal or trying to squeeze more money out of it. Fine, the scarred one finally said, but I want the money today. And if it doesn't come, the debt is yours. João nodded, already dialing the bank. As he spoke to the manager, he glanced at Sophia, who had stepped away from her brother, and now looked at him with such intense gratitude, it was painful to witness. There was something in her eyes, an inner strength that even that degrading situation hadn't broken, that reminded him of his own daughter, Maria Eduarda, who would be about the same age if she were still alive. An hour later, the 15,000 reais were in the hands of the enforcers, who left the bar without saying goodbye. Marcelo tried to approach his sister, but she pushed him back with a look of disgust and disappointment that said more than words ever could. Sophia, he began, but she cut him off. No, I don't want to hear it. You stopped being my brother the moment you sold me like I was an object. João watched in silence, recognizing in the young woman a dignity and strength that contrasted with her age. When Marcelo finally left, head down and muttering apologies no one wanted, Sophia turned to him. Why did you do that for me? You don't even know me. João studied her for a moment before replying, because everyone deserves a chance to start over, and because, he hesitated, feeling a lump in his throat, because I had a daughter about your age, and I'd want someone to help her if she needed it. Had, Sophia said softly, her perception surprising him. Yes, had, he sighed deeply. Look, I don't know your situation, but if you have nowhere to go, I don't, she admitted, the vulnerability finally breaking through her voice. My parents died when I was 15. Marcelo was all I had left. João felt something stir in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in 3 years. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. The recognition of someone who, like him, had lost everything and now needed a reason to keep going. Then come with me, he said, surprising even himself with how natural it felt. The ranch is big. There's more than enough room. You can stay until you decide what to do with your life. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to see into his soul through his eyes. Finally, she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. I'll find a way to repay you. You don't need to repay me. You just need a chance to be happy. Everyone deserves that. As they walked toward the pickup, the sun now high was warming the asphalt of Santa Rosa de Serra's main street. João didn't know it yet, but by saving Sophia, he had just taken the first step in saving himself from the darkness that had consumed him for 3 years. And Sophia, looking for the first time in a long while at a future not completely ruled by fear, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be different from what she had always imagined. The road back to the ranch had never seemed so full of possibility. The silence in the pickup truck stretched between João and Sophia like an invisible bridge neither seemed brave enough to cross. The gravel road leading to Santa Isabel Ranch kicked up clouds of dust that danced in the rearview mirror, creating a hazy curtain between their present and the town they'd left behind. Sophia sat with her hands folded in her lap, occasionally stealing glances at the weathered man beside her, trying to understand what kind of person would spend 15,000 reais on a complete stranger. João gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his knuckles white against the worn leather. He hadn't thought through the implications of his impulsive decision. For 3 years, the ranch had been his sanctuary of solitude, a place where he could avoid the pitying looks and well-meaning advice of neighbors who thought they understood his grief. Now he was bringing someone into that sacred space, someone young, vulnerable, and undoubtedly carrying her own share of pain. Tell me about the ranch, Sophia said softly, breaking the silence that had grown uncomfortable. João glanced at her, surprised by the genuine curiosity in her voice. Most people in town knew the story of Santa Isabel Ranch, but Sophia wasn't from around here. To her, he was just a stranger who had inexplicably become her savior. It's been in my family for 4 generations, he began, his voice rusty from disuse. My great-grandfather settled here in the 1920s, started with just 50 acres and a handful of cattle. By the time my father inherited it, we had over 2,000 acres and were one of the largest operations in the region. And now, the question hung in the air like smoke. João felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always came when he had to explain the current state of his life. Now it's just me and about 30 head of cattle. Most of the land sits empty. He paused, then added quietly, "Hard to run a place this big when you don't see the point anymore." Sophia studied his profile as he drove, noting the way his jaw tightened when he mentioned being alone. She recognized the look. She'd seen it in her own mirror often enough. What happened? João was quiet for so long that Sophia began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the engine's rumble. Car accident. 3 years ago. My wife Carmen and our daughter Maria Eduarda were coming back from town after a shopping trip. Black ice on the bridge over Rio Pequeno. He swallowed hard. They said it was instantaneous. Carmen was 38. Maria Eduarda was 16. Sophia felt her heart clench. No wonder he lived like a ghost. He was haunting his own life, unable to move forward but unwilling to let go. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and the simple words carried more weight than any elaborate condolence could have. "What about you?" João asked, deflecting attention from his own pain. "How did you end up with Marcelo as your only family?" Sophia's hands twisted in her lap. "Car accident too, actually. I was 15 when it happened. Mum and Dad were driving back from Porto Alegre, where Dad had a job interview. A drunk driver ran a red light." She stared out the window at the endless grassland. Marcelo was 26 then, just starting his own life. Suddenly he had a teenage sister to raise. Must have been hard on both of you. At first he tried, really tried. Got a job at the grain elevator. Rented a little house near the school so I could finish my education. But Marcelo always had problems with gambling, even when our parents were alive. After they died, it got worse. I think he blamed himself for not being able to give me the life they would have wanted." João nodded, understanding how guilt could poison a person from the inside. "When did things get really bad?" "About a year ago. He lost his job because he kept missing work to go to the illegal poker games. Started borrowing money from dangerous people. I tried to get him help, but..." She shrugged helplessly. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the ranch house, Sophia gasped. Even in its current neglected state, Santa Isabel Ranch was impressive. The main house was a sprawling structure of local stone and dark wood, with wide verandas that wrapped around 3 sides. Ancient oak trees provided shade, and in the distance, the pampa stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Despite the obvious signs of abandonment, overgrown gardens, peeling paint on the outbuildings, empty corrals, there was an undeniable majesty to the place. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed, and João felt a flicker of the old pride he used to take in his family's legacy. "Carmen always said this place had good bones," he said, parking in front of the main house. "She was always planning improvements, talking about expanding the garden, maybe adding a swimming pool for Maria Eduarda." They sat in the truck for a moment, both looking at the house that held so many memories for one and represented such an uncertain future for the other. Finally, João opened his door. "Come on, let me show you around." The interior of the house reflected the same neglect as the exterior. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through windows that hadn't been properly cleaned in years. Family photos still lined the mantelpiece, but they were covered with a fine layer of dust, like memories slowly being buried by time. The kitchen, once clearly the heart of a busy household, felt cavernous and cold despite the warm day outside. "You can have Maria Eduarda's room," João said, leading Sophia down a hallway lined with more family photos. I haven't changed anything, but you can make whatever modifications you need." He opened a door to reveal a teenager's bedroom frozen in time. Posters of pop stars and horses covered the walls, schoolbooks sat stacked on a desk, and a collection of riding trophies gleamed on a shelf. It was like walking into a shrine, and Sophia felt the weight of occupying space that still belonged to someone else's memory. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. "Maybe there's another room." "This is the best one," João said firmly, though his voice betrayed the effort it cost him. Maria Eduarda would have wanted someone to use it. She hated waste. Sophia nodded, understanding that this was his way of honoring his daughter's memory, while also forcing himself to take a step forward. "Thank you for everything." That evening, they sat on the front veranda sharing a simple dinner of grilled meat and rice that João had prepared. The conversation came easier now, lubricated by shared stories, and the recognition of kindred spirits who had both lost everything and were trying to figure out how to continue living. "What were your plans?" João asked as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Before today, I mean. What did you want to do with your life?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, as if she'd forgotten she was allowed to have dreams. "I wanted to be a veterinarian. Always loved animals. I was actually accepted to the university in Porto Alegre, but when Marcelo's problems got worse, I couldn't leave. Used my college fund to pay off some of his smaller debts." João felt a familiar anger rise in his chest, not at Sophia, but at the circumstances that had forced a bright young woman to sacrifice her future for someone who ultimately betrayed her trust. "Maybe it's not too late," he said carefully. "The semester doesn't start until March. That gives you 7 months to figure things out. I don't have any money left, and I doubt any university would accept someone whose legal guardian tried to sell her to pay gambling debts. Money can be earned, and your past doesn't define your future." João surprised himself with the conviction in his voice. When had he stopped believing that applied to his own life? As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from having no other choice, but the genuine belief that maybe, just maybe, her life could be more than just surviving from one crisis to the next. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "Really, it can't just be because I remind you of your daughter." João was quiet for a long time, staring out at the land his family had worked for generations. When he finally answered, his voice was thoughtful and honest. "Because maybe helping you is the first step toward helping myself. I've been dead for 3 years, Sophia, going through the motions but not really living. Today, for the first time since the accident, I felt like I had a purpose." In the distance, a night bird called out across the grassland, its cry both lonely and beautiful. Neither João nor Sophia knew it yet, but that sound would become the soundtrack to their healing. Two broken people slowly learning that sometimes salvation comes not from saving yourself, but from saving someone else. 3 weeks had passed since Sophia arrived at Santa Isabel Ranch, and the rhythms of rural life had begun to weave themselves into the fabric of her days. She woke each morning to the sound of roosters crowing and the distant lowing of cattle, sounds that had initially seemed foreign, but now provided a comforting soundtrack to her new reality. The terror that had gripped her that day in the bar felt like a lifetime ago, replaced by something she'd almost forgotten existed, a sense of security. João had been careful to give her space while still making sure she felt welcome. He'd shown her how to work the old washing machine in the utility room, explained the quirks of the temperamental hot water heater, and given her free rein in the kitchen. Most importantly, he'd respected her need to process everything that had happened without pressuring her to talk about it before she was ready. On this particular morning, Sophia stood in the kitchen preparing coffee in the battered aluminum pot that João preferred, watching through the window as he repaired a section of fence near the main corral. Over the past weeks, she'd noticed subtle changes in him. His shoulders didn't carry quite the same weight of defeat, and occasionally she caught glimpses of the man he must have been before tragedy reshaped his world. The decision to help him with the ranch work hadn't been conscious. It started small, washing the dishes after meals, sweeping the veranda, organizing the cluttered pantry. But as the days passed, Sophia found herself drawn to larger tasks. She'd grown up helping her father with his small vegetable garden, and something about working the land felt right, felt healing. "Morning," João said as he came through the kitchen door, hanging his worn cowboy hat on the hook by the entrance. His hands were already dirty from the morning's work, but Sophia had learned he never sat down to breakfast without washing them thoroughly, a habit Carmen had insisted on, he'd mentioned once. "I made extra coffee," Sophia said, pouring him a cup in the blue ceramic mug that was clearly his favorite. "And I was thinking, maybe I could help you with the fence repair today. I'm getting tired of finding things to organize inside." João paused with the coffee cup halfway to his lips. Over the weeks, he'd watched Sophia gradually emerge from the shell of trauma that had initially surrounded her. Her natural intelligence and humor had begun to surface, along with a work ethic that reminded him of his own younger days when the ranch had been his whole world. "It's hard work," he warned, though there was no discouragement in his voice, "and it's going to be hot today." "I'm tougher than I look," Sophia replied with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Besides, I need to start earning my keep around here." "You don't owe me anything, Sophia. I thought we established that." "I know, but I want to help. This place," she gestured toward the window, where the morning sun was painting the grassland gold. It's starting to feel like home, and I want to take care of it. Something shifted in Joan's chest at her words. The ranch hadn't felt like home to him in 3 years, but seeing it through Sophia's eyes, watching her discover beauty in things he'd stopped noticing, was slowly changing his perspective. They worked side by side through the morning, replacing rotted fence posts and stringing new wire. Sophia proved to be a quick learner and wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. She asked intelligent questions about ranch management and listened intently to Joan's explanations about cattle rotation and pasture maintenance. For the first time in years, he found himself thinking about the future of the ranch rather than just surviving another day. "Tell me about the horses," Sophia said during their lunch break, nodding toward the empty stables visible from where they sat in the shade of an old oak tree. Joan's expression grew wistful. "We used to have 12. Carmen's mare, Rosa, was her pride and joy, a beautiful palomino with the gentlest temperament you could imagine. Maria Eduarda had a paint horse named Trovão that she trained herself from a colt." He was quiet for a moment. "I sold them all after the accident. Couldn't bear to look at them." "Do you regret it?" The question was asked without judgment, but João felt its weight. "Every day. Carmen always said the horses were the soul of the ranch. Without them, it's just land and buildings." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Maybe it's time to bring some soul back. That afternoon, as they continued working on the fence, a pickup truck appeared on the horizon, kicking up a plume of dust as it approached. João squinted against the sun, recognizing the vehicle of his neighbor, Roberto Silva, whose ranch bordered the southern edge of Santa Isabel. Roberto was a man in his 60s, weathered by decades of ranch work, but still strong as a bull. He'd been João's father's closest friend and had watched João grow up. Since the accident, he'd made regular visits to check on his neighbor, often bringing food or offering help with ranch work that João was too stubborn to accept. "João," Roberto called out as he climbed from his truck. "Looking good out here. Haven't seen this much activity at Santa Isabel in years." His curious gaze fell on Sophia, who was wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her glove. "Roberto, this is Sophia," João said, noting the speculation in his neighbor's eyes. "She's staying at the ranch for a while, helping out with some projects." Roberto's weathered face broke into a grin as he extended his hand to Sophia. "Any friend of João's is welcome around here, though I have to say it's been a long time since I've seen him with company." Sophia shook his hand firmly, meeting his gaze directly. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Silva. João's been very kind to me. Roberto, please. And kindness runs in the Machado family." He turned back to João. "Actually, I came over because I have a proposition for you. Remember my mare, Estrella? She had a foal 3 months ago, but the little one's been having trouble bonding with the other horses. My grandson thinks she needs more individual attention than we can give her right now." João frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you take her for a while. Give her some space to grow, some one-on-one training. You always had the best touch with young horses." Roberto's eyes twinkled. "Besides, a ranch without horses is like a guitar without strings, technically functional but missing its music." Sophia watched the internal struggle play out across João's features. She could see the longing in his eyes, the part of him that missed the connection he'd once had with horses. But she could also see the fear, the terror of caring about something again, of opening himself up to the possibility of loss. "I don't know, Roberto. I'm out of practice. Horses don't forget good horsemen," Roberto said firmly. "And from what I can see, you're not quite as alone as you used to be. Maybe it's time to start rebuilding what was lost." Sophia stepped forward. "I've never worked with horses before, but I'd love to learn, if you're willing to teach me," she added, looking at João. The combination of Roberto's gentle pressure and Sophia's genuine enthusiasm finally broke through João's resistance. "When would you want to bring her over? How about tomorrow morning? I'll trailer her over with some feed and basic equipment." Roberto clapped João on the shoulder. "You won't regret this, my friend. That little filly has spirit. Reminds me of Rosa, actually." After Roberto left, promising to return the next morning with the young horse, Sophia and João finished their fence work in contemplative silence. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they sat on the veranda sharing a simple dinner of grilled chicken and fresh vegetables from the garden Sophia had begun reviving. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Sophia asked, noting the tension in João's shoulders. "Terrified," he admitted. "What if I've lost the touch? What if I can't connect with her?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Sophia said simply. "I may not know anything about horses, but I know about starting over. And I know that sometimes the things that scare us most are the things we need most." João looked at her, struck by the wisdom in someone so young. Over the past weeks, he'd watched Sophia transform from a frightened girl into a strong, determined woman. Her presence had brought life back to the ranch in ways he was only beginning to understand. Carmen used to say that horses could sense when someone needed healing, he said quietly. Maybe that's why Roberto's really bringing this filly to us. Maybe, Sophia agreed. Or maybe he just knows that healing happens best when you have something to care about, besides yourself. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, both João and Sophia felt the weight of tomorrow's possibilities. Neither fully understood it yet, but they were about to take another crucial step in their journey back to life. A journey that would prove healing isn't just about letting go of the past, but about having the courage to embrace the future. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard as Roberto's horse trailer rumbled up the dirt road, its arrival marking what would become a turning point in the lives of everyone at Santa Isabel Ranch. Sophia stood beside João on the front porch, both of them nervous in their own ways. João's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the porch railing. His first time working with horses since the accident felt like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. "Remember what I told you?" Roberto called out as he began backing the trailer toward the round pen that João and Sophia had spent the previous evening cleaning and checking for safety. "She's skittish but intelligent. Needs patience more than anything else." As the trailer door opened, a beautiful chestnut filly with a white blaze stepped cautiously into the sunlight. She couldn't have been more than 14 hands high, with the leggy awkwardness of youth, but already showing the elegant lines that promised she would grow into a magnificent horse. Her dark eyes darted nervously around the unfamiliar surroundings, and her nostrils flared as she tested the new scents carried on the morning breeze. "Her name's Luna," Roberto explained as he carefully led the young horse toward the pen. "Born on a night with the biggest full moon I'd ever seen. She's got her mother's intelligence but her father's independent streak." Sophia found herself holding her breath as she watched João approach the filly. For a moment, he simply stood at the fence, studying the young horse with an expression she'd never seen before. It was a mixture of longing, fear, and something that looked almost like recognition. "Hello, beautiful," João said softly, his voice carrying a gentleness that Sophia had glimpsed only rarely. "You're far from home, aren't you?" Luna's ears pricked forward at the sound of his voice, and she took a tentative step toward the fence. Something in João's posture began to change. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing deepened, and the tension that had been radiating from him all morning started to dissipate. "She likes you already," Roberto observed with satisfaction. "Horses know good people, João. They always have." Over the next hour, Roberto showed them the basics of Luna's care routine, her feeding schedule, the supplements she needed, how to clean her hooves and brush her coat. But as Sophia watched João interact with the filly, she realized he was remembering skills that had never really left him, just been buried under layers of grief and isolation. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," Roberto said as he prepared to leave. "Take your time with her, João. Let her set the pace. And Sophia," he added with a knowing smile, "you're going to love working with horses. They have a way of teaching you things about yourself you never knew." After Roberto's truck disappeared down the road, Sophia and João spent the rest of the morning simply being present with Luna. They sat on overturned buckets outside her pen, talking quietly while the filly explored her new surroundings. Gradually, Luna began to relax, eventually approaching the fence to investigate these new humans who seemed content to let her take the lead. "Want to try feeding her an apple?" João asked, pulling one from his pocket. Sophia's eyes lit up with excitement and nervousness. "What if she bites me?" "She won't. Luna's too polite for that. Just keep your hand flat and let her take it from your palm." The moment Luna's soft muzzle touched Sophia's hand, something magical happened. The young woman who had spent so many months feeling powerless and afraid suddenly felt a connection to something pure and innocent. The filly's trust, freely given, was a gift that touched something deep in Sophia's heart. "She's amazing," Sophia whispered, tears unexpectedly springing to her eyes. João watched the interaction with growing emotion. Seeing Sophia experience that first connection with a horse brought back floods of memories, teaching Maria Eduarda to ride, watching Carmen's face light up whenever she saw her beloved Rosa, the countless hours his family had spent in these same corrals, building bonds that he'd thought were lost forever. As the days turned into weeks, a routine developed around Luna's care. Every morning, João and Sophia would arrive at the pen together, and gradually, they began introducing basic training exercises. João's instincts with horses proved to be as sharp as ever, but what surprised him was Sophia's natural aptitude. She had patient hands and an intuitive understanding of the filly's moods and needs. "So you have the gift," Joan told her one afternoon, as they watched Luna respond perfectly to Sophia's gentle guidance. "Some people spend years learning what you've picked up in weeks." Sophia blushed with pride, but there was something more significant happening. Working with Luna had given her a sense of purpose and confidence that was transforming her from the inside out. The scared young woman who had arrived at the ranch 2 months earlier was evolving into someone strong, capable, and sure of her own worth. It was on a warm evening in late November that everything came together in a moment of perfect clarity. Sophia had successfully led Luna through a complex training exercise, and the filly was responding to voice commands with an eagerness that spoke to the bond they'd developed. Joan stood watching from the fence, his heart full of an emotion he hadn't felt in 3 years, pure joy. "I've been thinking," Sophia said as they put Luna away for the night, "about what you said that first day. About second chances." Joan looked at her questioningly, noting the serious tone in her voice. "I want to apply for veterinary school again, for the spring semester, and I want to specialize in equine medicine." The smile that spread across Joan's face was radiant. "Sophia, that's wonderful, but the application deadline, I called yesterday. They'll accept late applications if there are special circumstances, and I think our story qualifies as special circumstances." "Our story?" Sophia took a deep breath, gathering courage for what she wanted to say next. "I want to stay here, Joan, even after I start school. Porto Alegre isn't that far. I could commute. This ranch, working with Luna, helping you rebuild what you lost. It feels like what I'm supposed to be doing." Joan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Sophia, you don't owe me. This isn't about owing you anything. This is about choosing the life I want to live." She gestured toward the ranch house, where warm light spilled from the windows onto the veranda. "For the first time since my parents died, I feel like I'm home. Really home. And I think maybe you do too." Joan looked around at the ranch that had slowly come back to life over the past months. The fences were repaired, the gardens were flourishing under Sophia's care, and Luna's presence had brought an energy and purpose that he'd forgotten was possible. More importantly, the crushing loneliness that had defined his existence for 3 years had been replaced by something he'd never expected to experience again: family. "Carmen always said this place worked best when it had people who loved it," he said quietly. "She would have adored you, you know. And Maria Eduarda would have been so excited to have an older sister to teach about horses." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. Maybe they sent me here. Maybe this was always supposed to happen. As they walked back to the house together, Luna whinnied softly from her pen, as if approving of the decision. The ranch that had been a monument to loss was slowly becoming a testament to the possibility of new beginnings. Joan had saved Sophia from a terrible fate, but in doing so, she had saved him from a living death. 6 months later, Sophia would receive her acceptance letter to veterinary school. A year after that, Luna would give birth to the first foal born at Santa Isabel Ranch in 4 years. And through it all, the ranch would continue to heal and grow, proving that sometimes the best way to honor what you've lost is to nurture what you've found. Their story had begun with an act of desperate kindness, but it would continue as a testament to the healing power of purpose, family, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and the animals they love.